Hello and welcome to
Uh,
No Metal Loud Totally. My first video that I'm doing exclusively for TMZ and also
yes, that's actually what TMZ stands for.
Tom's video.
Media Zone. I don't know.
So we have no plans right now. We're just doing some kind of cast thing.
Yes, this is just a free form. We have no idea we're gonna do.
Yeah, we're good friends on Twitter. Let's talk about that. Why do you want to fight me all the time recently on Twitter?
I don't want to fight. You're the one who called
Beat
me
your
to
ass.
fight. You followed every tweet. Do you want to fight me?
Yeah,
Well,
that's true.
what's that all about?
Maybe I feel attacked.
You feel
Maybe
attacked
that's it.
because
I don't know.
my opinions are
Because
correct.
you have opinions. I feel attacked when people have opinions.
Wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a world where no one had opinions?
People shouldn't have opinions. This is the real problem. That's how we make America great again. Is to just stop all opinions.
Outlaw opinions.
Opinions are the fucking worst.
Exactly.
They're horrendous.
Nobody should have them.
You're you got a beard.
I do have a beard.
See that because we're on video, taking
Yes.
advantage of this new medium.
Yes.
Um, Looks like it's fairly bright where you are.
Uh, yeah, right now it's actually a pretty beautiful day. It's like 60 degrees out, bright and sunny.
Nice.
Pretty nice.
And you're in Connecticut.
I am in Connecticut, yes.
What is your home address?
My home address is.
All the Simple Plan fans, get your pens out.
You could send your hate mail to Go Fuck Yourself Lane.
All your glitter
Pick it up.
bombs. It's really rainy here in San Diego and very dark.
That sounds awful and sounds like the opposite of what San Diego should be.
Yeah, that's not too bad. Get some water finally. Water helps. Water is good for living.
True. Don't you guys like always have fires and stuff? Isn't that like
Yeah,
part of your
it's
weather?
just we're constantly on fire. Like
That's what I figured.
today, it's the first day of the year that I'm actually not literally on fire right now. So it's been a bonus today.
The
Uh,
weather forecast.
yeah, weather forecast. You're currently on fire. Freak out.
Perfect.
So you do music reviews,
Yes.
which I retweet a lot of stuff that you do, but I don't retweet a lot of the music stuff. How do you feel about that?
Well, I take it as a personal attack,
Yeah,
actually.
I feel like that's why you want to fight me.
Yes, that is mostly the reason why I feel like it's a personal assault
Yeah,
against me.
it's
I'm
weird because in high school I was a musician. In college I was a college radio DJ. I was like into music and stuff. I still like music, obviously.
yeah,
Some people are like, I hate music. I hate all music,
those
and
people are terrible.
I don't understand how that's even possible.
It's not. They're just not real people. That's what it is.
They have opinions. That's the problem. Again,
Exactly. They
kind of
need
get
to
to the root.
stop having opinions.
We got to work on this.
Yeah. We'll make America great again.
I'll make some T-shirts. Make America great again. No opinions.
No opinions ever.
Uh, but yeah, there is that kind of thing where the further away you get from college, the more you kind of like you become neutral on music. This is generally, obviously, not everybody. You get neutral on music, and then you start like actively hating music because you don't understand any of the music.
I mean,
Like the band names all suddenly like when you're in high school, you're like, oh, that fucking band name is so awesome. Um, uh, Thunder of My Fuck, right?
yeah,
It's my heavy metal band.
it's awesome.
Uh, uh, Satan's Satan's balloon has no air, and you're like, that's fucking deep, man. It's so deep. But the older you get, the more you're like, what the fuck is this?
See,
What?
that's funny because like there's a lot of bands that I listen to that I think kind of almost ruin themselves with their music because of their names. Like one of my
Right.
favorite bands' name is called "I Wrestled a Bear Once."
It's,
Which, yeah, exactly. That's the reaction, and it's
yeah,
like I feel weird telling people I listen to them
yeah.
because their music is fantastic, and it's not what you'd expect. It's the opposite of juvenile.
It's
It's
not what you'd expect from the name I wrestled the bear once. Which is like
exactly.
I well, but maybe the thing is good about it is that I literally have no expectations from that band. Like they they could be an all woman barbershop quartet, and I'd be like, I get it, I
All
get
right.
it. It's a good name.
Yeah.
They could literally just be two guys like trying to light their pots and pans on fire, and I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense too. So
It's good music.
yeah,
Enjoy that sound.
it's my new side project
Yeah.
called Thunder of Your Fuck.
Nice.
They're all just called that. Yeah,
That's every band you have.
I mean, there's that I think famous list from the Onion, the
Huh.
like the year's worst band names. I don't know if they do it anymore, but it's pretty funny. There was one band one year called Happy Mother's Day I Can't Read. There was one called I'm a Fucking Gymnast, and it was all one word, and gymnast was spelled wrong.
That's awesome. Actually, kind of
Yeah,
makes me want to listen to that.
yeah, I know, right? It's actually pretty good. I just I say that like sometimes when I'm pissed off because I did something, like I'll drop something on my tone, and be like I'm a fucking gymnast. Um,
So good.
yeah,
I don't even know.
it it's got a lot of purposes. You can
Yeah.
fit it in almost anywhere, so it's
Yeah.
pretty good.
No,
Uh,
like band names are for me. Like what's weirder is band names and titles as well. For me, it's kind of weird because like I hear all these titles and these names, and I have no idea what to expect from half of them. And it actually kind of for movies specifically, because I know that's your thing,
yeah, sort of.
kind of. I don't know what to
Opinions are more my thing.
opinions. Yeah,
Shut up. I'm the only one who's allowed.
exactly.
They're kind of. I know that you have a head of steam going and a train of thought going, which is
Yeah,
why I'm interrupting you.
fantastic.
Um, now you know how it feels to be Brian on the show. Um, it feels like they're switching places, the band names and the movie names.
Yeah.
Because like, tell me that you couldn't picture an indie band right now being called the Towering Inferno,
No.
and uh, and also no, was that the wrong? I think I went the wrong way. Um, that like it feels like there could be a band called Sicario. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe the movie names are getting shorter, except for Batman v Superman, Dawn
Dawn
of
of
whatever. Um,
Dawn of merchandising.
yeah, Dawn of Zack Snyder, Dawn of whatever. Well, I was going somewhere. No, no, it
Sorry.
wasn't actually. Shaun of the Dead. Uh, but yeah, someone's mowing their lawn. Um,
Always good.
yeah. I lost. I interrupted your train of thought in order to lose my.
Well, I just
Uh,
feel like like I see all these movies. Wait,
do you recognize this?
wait, I can't see it.
I can't.
No, totally. I'd say better late than never, but this case, yes, I do recognize this, and I stand. I definitely stand by that 100%.
This is a reaction tweet from my friend Tom regarding an episode of Gringo Fuck Yourself, which is another thing that I do.
Full podcast.
I would just the worst podcast in the world. I
Disaster.
uh I just happened to be doing printer testing when you tweeted that, and it came up, and I looked at it, and I was like, all right,
It's perfect.
I gotta print something.
Should be framed.
Yeah, I'm gonna. It's the next
The
thing.
the debut TV episode of Gringo Fuck Yourself. It should
Uh-huh.
be hanging in the
Here's
background
the yeah.
somewhere.
Here's the title card. It doesn't even say the name of the show. It just here's what you're
Exactly.
gonna expect. You miserable fucks.
Miserable show.
So, yeah, so that's where I am with music, where I'm just like, I I find one or two bands that I like, and I just listen to them all the time. And sometimes it's not even new music. Like I've listened to all of Rage Against the Machine's albums over and over again for like the past 3 weeks. Like I don't think I've listened to anything else.
I mean, if
That's
it works, it works. I mean, for music especially, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with any form of media with consuming the same thing over and over again. If it's something you like, I mean,
yeah,
you don't need to branch out. Branching out's cool. It can discover new things, but it's not like I don't judge people for sticking with one thing.
yeah. I mean, you can't. It's
No,
whatever. It's opinions.
like
Fucking
like what you like, and that's it.
yeah.
You know?
So I mostly I don't retweet that stuff because I don't know what bands you're talking about and I don't want to disagree with you basically. Like I'm gonna retweet this thing about a simple plan. I don't know what the fuck. Like I've heard them a couple times, but I might love them. In which case, retweeting your review is kind of weird. Um, I gotta say too, like I, it's hard for me to watch videos on my phone because then my phone dies like instantly. My phone's kind of old.
Yeah.
Uh, when we did Brian and I did an interview with you, I ripped the audio from the YouTube video, and that's how I
Uh-oh.
experienced that interview. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, it's harder for me to watch videos. I don't know why. A lot of people, judging by the success of all like the film essays and stuff, which is kind of like what we do, except we do audio for a visual medium.
Yes.
Judging by that success, I am alone on this, but
I mean, it depends for me. I mean, sometimes I'll put a lot of times what I'll do is I'll watch a video and just put it on as background noise. So I might as well just have the audio of it.
right.
But sometimes, especially if it's like a short thing, I like having the visuals with it to go with
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah,
If it's something that's like over 30 minutes, I don't want to stare. Eventually the video is going to be stale over 30 minutes.
yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, it would make more sense if we did a video than an audio podcast, but I don't care. People can figure it out.
yeah, whatever.
Can't, if you can't
People,
remember it, and I'm describing it, and I play the clip, then that's on you.
people don't know what they want.
They don't.
They're idiots.
People will, yeah. Fucking people. Let's talk about how bad people are.
People
People
are
are awful.
people are a mistake.
They're a cancer on the earth, except for me, basically.
Exactly. That's exactly how it is.
Just they can just.
People are worthless.
What else? You want to fight? We can
We
fight
should
about something.
fight. Well, speaking of people being terrible, I had a dream the other night where I had a legitimate intellectual discussion about euthanasia over the age of 80.
Huh?
And I don't know how to feel about that.
Which side were you on?
Oh, I was for it. They're old. They had their
Old
time.
people. Old people. We don't need them anymore.
People are terrible.
You know. Well, subconscious thing you're working out.
I guess.
Maybe you're afraid of the people around you dying, and there's some kind of comfort and certainty in knowing that they're going to die at some point.
I guess so. Maybe.
Because think about it, like there is a certain point. I'm not, we're not trying to be insensitive here, but there's a certain point where you have maybe a relative who's like old enough or maybe infirm enough that you're kind of like, the waiting is the hardest part at this point. Like
Yeah.
they're gonna go soon, and again, not to be like we're being kind of self oriented here. Like this is kind of what's going on in people's heads. Like you don't want them to go because you'll miss them,
Yeah.
but they're gonna die, and maybe knowing when is a thing that could like ease anxiety.
I think knowing when would ease a lot of anxiety. I think that's a good way to look at it. It's also, especially depending on the condition of the person, I think it's a little selfish to want them to stay. I mean, if you
Mm.
see somebody suffering, especially, you want them not to suffer. Like,
Yeah.
which doesn't mean go out and, cover grandma with a pillow, but you know, it's not such a bad thing for her to go. You shouldn't be make her comfortable, not make her stay, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's kind of up to the person, right? If they're able to communicate what they want to do.
Yeah, which is good. Which is here's a time for a PSA. If
Mm.
you do not have a living will, you should have one. They are very good to
I do,
have.
I do not. I don't have that, and my wife and I we don't have an advanced directive either, which I think I'm not sure that they're exactly the same thing, but I think they overlap a little bit.
Yeah,
Basically, it's one of those medical things where like if you're incapacitated or whatever, here's your directive. Here's your
which is good. I mean, it's a good thing to have because you never know what's going to happen, and it's better. It's an easy thing to do.
yeah. Yeah, I mean really what it is to help your loved ones cope with whatever thing has happened.
Yeah.
because the not knowing what the person would have wanted and they can't communicate it, that's like the worst thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you think you know somebody, but
Cat, sorry,
oh,
got distracted.
oh yeah,
Just
she's
crept out of the side of your head.
yes,
No
she's
thing.
enjoying the open window.
Nice.
It's her thing.
I want to talk to the cat. I want a cat. We're not allowed to have one. We're not allowed to have pets because our
Really?
landlord's kind of a dude.
Oh, that's awful.
It is. It really is. We're
Yeah.
both animal lovers. That's why we have the dog bear. This is the
Oh yeah.
closest thing we can have to a pet.
See, that works.
Not really.
Yeah. Well.
I can make it. Maybe I can make it check out the window so I can.
Yeah. There we go.
Now it feels.
Yeah. No.
Cat's camping out. I'm just gonna be staring at your cat now.
Oh, that's cool.
I get very
Uh,
distracted.
she's very distracting. No, I got her from a. She was a rescue.
Mm,
Guess what happens? This sucks for a lot of animals, but people move and they move to places like that can't have animals, and they'll
yeah.
just leave them.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
That's so gross to me.
It is.
Uh,
It doesn't make any sense. People are, again, people are fucking
Terrible,
terrible.
awful, awful people.
I had something. Well, I have a couple of things. I don't want to talk about them though.
All right, we'll
I
talk.
have a I have a story about somebody deciding to die, and that was interesting. It like they were in the hospital,
Yeah,
and like there were surgery options and everything, and they did not have to. They weren't. The death was not impending, but they were like, "Nah, it's over. I'm done. Peace out." Uh,
that's fine.
yeah, it's interesting because you want to respect the decision, but at the same time, you're like, but you could have like another 20 years. Like, what are you doing? Like it's just it's a hard thing when you're in that position to kind of, it's very easy in advance to be very absolutist and like, you know, they should determine what they want to do. And I think that's where you come down on it. And I think that's the right place to come down on. But then like kind of once you're met with that situation, it's like, it's really,
Yeah,
I'm not sure that you're like prepared for the emotionality
I don't
of
think
it.
you ever can be.
Yeah.
It's not really something you can think you can, but
Yeah.
you know.
Well, it's a situation that not that many people talk about. Like I almost feel like if this was a suicide instead, that like I might be more prepared for it because at least there's language around that, and discussion around that. But someone going into the hospital and like going in the hospital for a surgery, but then saying no, just let me die. Like there's just not a lot of conversation around that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
but yeah, that's a
it's a hard thing to deal with too because it's also a matter of, is this really what that person wants, or is it like a depression type thing?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because there's a difference between completely accepting your fate and just accepting, okay, I'm done. I want to die. This is my
Yeah.
choice. It's not from depression. It's not from anything. It's just let me go. I'm done. And
Yeah.
then then there's also the whole I feel miserable. I just want to die kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
which it's a hard thing to deal with because
Yeah.
it's a sensitive issue.
Yeah. I mean, that's something you and I can talk. We've both kind of hinted on Twitter about talking about suicide. I don't know if I want to do that right
I'm
now.
fully open about it.
Yeah.
I have no issues with talking about it at all because I've been there. I joke about it, which I know is sometimes bad because other people don't like that, which I understand. Everyone's different, but like that's kind of my coping mechanism a lot of
Sure.
times.
Yeah.
Very much enjoy kind of making fun of myself because I've kind of come to terms with, if I do it, nobody else can do. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's nothing you can say to me that I haven't already said to myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's whatever. It's whatever you're open to or up to.
I mean, I'll help you with that. If you need to be insulted, just tweet me.
Well, like I
I'll
said,
run some shit at you.
I often feel insulted by your tweets. I take them, especially when you're talking about the horrors of that men and white men in particular do. I feel personally insulted by them.
You're well, I mean, it probably is weird to be such a huge part of the problem, Tom.
It
Uh,
is.
that you're being called out all the time. What I would suggest though is just stop being so problematic, and I would lighten up a little bit. I think, yeah.
I should try. I should try
It,
to stop being so problematic.
that is a weird thing. Like, I think the degree to which people take um, the degree to which people take criticism lobbed at their group as personal is such a huge thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's hard to disassociate from it, and I mean, for some of these issues in particular, what I would say is it's almost like being brainwashed and then having somebody tell you, well, that's not true.
yeah,
It's like if somebody come around and told you, that color blue, that doesn't actually exist.
yeah,
It's not a real thing. What you're seeing is
right,
green or something.
yeah, yeah,
How are you're going to call that person crazy? You're going to take it as a personal kind of, I don't know, not exactly the same, but that's kind of the
yeah,
mindset.
yeah, yeah. No, I get you. Yeah, I mean it's a difficult thing. Like I feel like we're to a certain degree we're raised so much to believe that other people have experiences that are very, very similar to ours. That within the human race altogether, there's a degree of variation of like 1% or something.
Yeah,
Whereas when you start kind of getting out in the world, you start realizing that's highly variant, and that maybe really all we have in common is like 20% of our experiences, and
yeah,
that's a low number, but also too, like, if you want to cope in the world, you kind of do have to assume that most other people are thinking something similar to what you're thinking. Like, if you think about something like driving, if you just go out there and you assume only 20% of people are going to follow the rules, like, you're going to end up being the one who causes the accident, right? Because
yeah.
you're like,
That's true.
I was trying to avoid you know what, I ran that light because I know that someone else was gonna not run the light, whatever. So, like, there is a certain degree to which you have to assume that you know what other people are thinking, but there is a limit to that, just like everything else.
It's also kind of the mentality of like, I don't see this happening. Not just that my experience is universal, but I don't see this happening. So what you're telling me isn't true.
Right?
That kind
Yeah.
of thing. Which, I'll be honest, like that was me years ago. It's such a
Yeah.
hard thing to kind of cope with and realize that maybe just because what I don't see this happening, it doesn't mean it's not happening. It doesn't mean that this person is overreacting or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I think we all kind of grow up. Even people of color, and I'm assuming women. I guess probably shouldn't speak for women. Should I? I'm a man, so maybe I can. Um, uh, but yeah, like, even my experience, like, I thought a lot of my experience was similar to other people's, like, in the sense that when stuff has happened to me that was kind of race based, I actually assumed that stuff happened to white people too, erroneously. Like, a lot of it doesn't, right? And
Yeah.
stuff that maybe I am confusing with, like, I think the cause was race, but maybe it wasn't. Like, maybe that stuff happens to white people too, but it's a perspective thing. And so like, when I would start talking to people, like, oh yeah, when you do this thing and this person reacts this way, and they're like, what? um I'm like, oh, they don't try to they don't try to kick you out when you go there. They don't call you chink when you go there. Huh, maybe that's just me then. um so, like, even coming from my perspective, it's like it's been kind of a difficult thing to understand what parts of my experience are driven by things that I can't control, that other people see in me that really aren't me, right?
Yeah.
Like the assumption that I'm good at math, or the assumption that, like, I want to work hard to prove, like, there is that assumption that, like, people that look like me want to work for 18 hours a day and, like, self-sacrifice, And
Yeah.
so when overtime comes around, or when like the bigger projects would come around, people would come to me first, and um, not because of my race, but because of my personality, I have a hard time saying no, and so like I would just be the one that would be there over the weekend, and that who's to say what was in the person's head when they gave me those gigantic projects, but um, you can't disprove it, and
Yeah.
the fact that there weren't other white people in there on the weekends like I was, that that's maybe an indication. But actually, I wanted to maybe ask you about skepticism, because you and I have had a couple of interesting conversations about that on Twitter.
Yes.
Um, I want to understand your side a little better, but also bully you into taking my side,
Makes
because your
sense.
opinions are terrible. Uh, Skepticism, like, it's important because we need to protect ourselves from people who are looking to take advantage of us.
Yes.
But also because a lot of dogma exists that's really harmful, not only to us but to other people. And if we ever hope to kind of overturn or defeat that dogma, we do have to be skeptical. Like, you always have to have your antenna up, right?
Yeah. My whole issue with like skepticism, like I kind of put it depends on what it is, but for me the way I look at it, which is I think I kind of have like a unique perspective on things being white, straight white male, because I can kind of see what my group kind of also sees, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like, okay, so for instance, basically we have the power. That's kind of undisputable fact. This world is run by people like me, and I'm not, you know, that's not something I'm ever going to deny or whatever. And for me, skepticism is when you challenge that power and you do it based on a lie, for instance, and it's caught out that it's a lie, you're ruining your whole group, kind of, in a way.
Mm.
I don't know if I'm kind of rambling a little bit with
No,
this,
I yeah, I get you. Yeah, yeah.
but if that group in power is going to look at this little group, trying to fight for whatever they're trying to fight for, and then say, well, one of your members lied about this, so all of you are liars, and we have the power, so we have the power to brand you all as liars,
Right.
and the rest of the world is going to see you as such.
Yeah. Do you think that's something that, so, like, if we contextualize the one person that lies as a person of color, and the people who brand them are the white people, is it feels to me like it's more the responsibility of white people to be like,
Oh yeah,
no, we don't
absolutely.
we don't brand everybody, like, we don't brand all white people because one white person like Donald Trump lies constantly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying it's not our responsibility or to break that, but my point is that's kind of how the world works, unfortunately.
Right.
And there's a huge difference, and I think this is, I have a lot of issues with people because there's a huge difference between the way the world should work and the way the world works, and you can't just expect the world to work the way that it should work. It's kind of a hard thing to get around because yeah, it should work like that. But people, we should be saying this is bullshit. Like this shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be like, for instance, the Black Lives Matter movement. People look at that and and I see this on like social media and stuff, and thankfully my friends and stuff aren't. I did a whole Facebook purge, so I don't get to see all the fun little tweets about that or posts about that anymore. But I was seeing people who are like, oh, they say they want equality and stuff, but look at them destroying their hometown and stuff like that, and they're all and kind of like perpetuating that whole thing of they're all thugs because of this and because maybe the
Right.
small group looted out of anger and out of emotion, and okay, whatever. What are you gonna do when that something like that happens to you? You're treated like that your whole life.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that spreads. People use that as a way to justify keeping them down, and
Yeah. I mean, I guess my argument would be that they'll, like, the people who want to keep other people down will kind of find anything.
yeah, that's true.
So it's kind of hard to say that, like, one action is justified or not based on the reaction of the people in power, you know?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying stuff like that isn't justified. And I'm not saying that these people aren't entitled to the reaction the way they are. That's not my place to say that, or
Mhm.
to be like that. My
Yeah,
only point is, it can essentially hurt things.
sure.
Which again is not to say don't do this. You have no right to do this. You're ruining what you're fighting for. It's just
Hmm.
it's an unfortunate way the world works.
Yeah,
You know.
I am. I kind of feel like you're like as someone of color, not myself, but if someone of color does, it's just so hard
Yeah.
slash impossible to do anything as an oppressed group that is going to not hurt it, right?
Oh yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I think you and I are on the same page in the sense that you want to find that spot where you're not hurting any movement, but you're also not choosing silence.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
but I think that gap is too small. Like I
It's
don't
a
see
hard
like
target.
yeah, what actions do we think fit inside of that gap there?
It's hard, but here's kind of the way I also look at it, and this is the reason why I feel strongly about this,
Okay.
because if you saw me and my posts and things from 5, 10 years ago, I don't think you'd be sitting here talking to me, and I
Mm,
would not blame you at all based on looking what I did, what I've things I've said,
sure.
things I felt,
Yeah.
and it kind of took like somebody really kind of finding that line and finding that target to really kind of change me, I guess,
Hmm.
and kind of open my eyes to things a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's also why I put a lot of things in the terms of brainwashing. It kind of feels like people in power and people who have privilege and things like that are essentially brainwashed into believing that they are entitled to that with
Yeah.
no work or anything, no with nothing.
Right. Yeah, they are. Right? Like even oppressed people are, right? Like they're brainwashed into believing that
Oh, yeah,
the people in power deserve it also.
and
Right? Like
that
I
they deserve to be oppressed.
yeah, exactly. Both things. Yeah. And that's what wokeness is all about, right? Like
Yeah,
being woke is just coming out of your brainwashing. Brainwashing is being asleep.
yeah.
And it's just like the Matrix, right? So,
It kind of feels that way, but at the same time, and that's again why I point to this is because when you're dealing with somebody who's brainwashed, you're not going to. The worst way to deal with somebody who's brainwashed is to start yelling and shouting at them and throwing things in their face,
yeah.
which again is not. I understand why people do that. I'm not saying you're not entitled to feel angry about something and do that, but it just feels like if you can change even if it's a gradual change. And it would be nice if everyone woke up tomorrow and was literally woke. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? That would be a
And Bay. Woke and
exactly
Mhm.
woke and bay, and everything would be lit. But like
Yeah.
that would be a beautiful world if everyone could just wake up tomorrow. But that's never going to happen. But we can shift the climate. It can change.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting how much it comes down to personal experience because no amount of politeness in the world was going to make me who I am today. Like
Yeah.
Ferguson changed me 100%,
Yeah.
and it's only because that was the first time that I saw firsthand the amount of pain that people were in. And my problem was that I was ignoring it because everybody was too polite. So that's kind of the thing about like and I get where you're coming from, and I'm not accusing you of anything, but like if you say something like you're never gonna get anywhere by doing such and such, like you can. It
Yeah.
just and it kind of matters, you know. Obviously, it depends on so many things because people are going to be convinced by whatever they're convinced by
Whatever they want
specifically.
to be.
Yeah, but I feel like saying that you need to be anything in order to be like taken seriously by a system is just as ineffectual as just as ineffectual as you're saying anger is maybe, right? Because like
Yeah.
they're it's not like we haven't already gone through decades of compliance to get to this spot, and so it's hard to think that further compliance could change anything, right? And it's because it's always saying that like, well, the revolution is very close at hand. If you would only just do X, Y, and Z, it would be here. And it used to be, if you pipe down, if you sit in the back of the bus, then we'll make a space for you eventually. Just kind of calm down for now, right? Um, and I think that that's just kind of like been going on and on. We saw the thing with one of Reagan's guys admitting that
Oh yeah,
they were trying to criminalize blackness and hippiness because that was the. I'm sorry, I said Reagan, right? I meant Nixon. Um,
it was Reagan too.
yeah, well, Reagan. I was telling something the other day, like that. It's hard to tell a difference now between conspiracy theories and actual fact because it was a quote unquote conspiracy theory forever that Nixon was doing this, and it's been a quote unquote conspiracy theory forever that Reagan introduced crack into poor black housing. And like, if I found out today that that was like provable by documentation, I don't think I could muster any surprise.
It's not
CIA agents
surprising.
going undercover like into that's a story. The CIA agents or FBI? No, I think CIA agents were going undercover into these poor neighborhoods and introducing crack to the neighborhoods. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it seemed like 5 years ago I would have thought that was far fetched, but now, if like I said, if I heard it today, I would have a hard time disbelieving it.
Well, it's kind of
Uh,
like people. It's like Martin Luther King. There was the whole conspiracy that the FBI was after him, and that was true,
right?
100%
Yeah,
true. You know.
yeah. And the thing with Malcolm X, right? Like the FBI file really pointed towards his downfall being when he joined the Nation of Islam. Like that there were people looking to stab him in the back, and when he was killed, it was like, oh, it was probably Nation of Islam. Um,
Yeah,
Probably wasn't.
probably wasn't.
I don't know. The system wanted him dead, clearly. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I like see that. That's kind of my thing. Is like we've been we've been trying, or not? We, right, the royal we, have been trying to tell oppressed people that they're one step away from freedom if they would just do this. Like, we've been trying to tell them that for hundreds of years, and I think now, like, I don't know if you like like we've had the Pepsi taste test. Like, we have soda number A or soda A and soda B. Like, we keep drinking soda A and being like, man, this is fucking disgusting. Like, I don't like how this tastes. But every day we're getting up and drinking soda A instead of like trying soda B. Like, maybe maybe instead of teaching oppressed people how to be more polite, we can teach, like, we can demand that people in power learn how to hear anger and filter it productively in their own heads. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, I'm not saying there's a difference
Yeah.
between being nice. Like, I'm not saying you have to be nice, or I should say polite. You don't have to be polite about things. There's no reason to be.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a side note. Like, where I am, and I've noticed this is kind of a lot of other people I've encountered, what we're taught is that pointing out somebody's racism is worse than their racism,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that you have to be polite about it, and that it's rude to assume that the person's being racist.
Right.
And the other thing with that is also, I think people have a hard time separating what you're doing is racist or contributing to a racist society versus you're a racist, which
Right.
I think a lot of people have really hard time, which is why that whole group, back to that group mentality,
Yeah.
why people take it as a personal attack, because that's what they hear. They don't hear your actions are racist. They hear you're a racist.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, like, I'm not saying anybody has to be polite about it. There's no reason to be. It's
Mm.
been too long. Something needs to change. There are problems. My only point is, it's more specific little examples that I've seen where it's
Mm.
like, you could handle this better. And I'm not going to tell somebody that, mostly because I don't feel like it's my place. You're going to handle your business the way you're going to handle it. But I
Mm.
still have my feelings about that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're a smart guy, and I think that I am also somewhat smart. And my whole thing, it's become almost absolute for me that if an oppressed person is conducting themselves in any way that's not encouraging violence, then I'm probably going to be okay with it. And in a lot of ways, it feels hypocritical because, like, I'm nice to 99% of people, not only on Twitter, but in life, right?
Yeah,
So it's not to say that I feel like that's a path for me to communicate effectively with people. But I think, like, I was thinking about this the other day. Radicalism just means departing from the current norms, right? Like,
yeah,
in one way of defining it. Like, obviously, it's kind of an overgeneralizing, but like, if we use that definition, it's I think it's radicalism that gets us out of where we are now because that's the thing that's outside of the system, right? The system is broken, so you need to be radical in some ways, and maybe being able to see people's anger as potentially productive is the kind of radical thing that would help. And I mean, like, I'm not even going into the idea that uh, what polite means as far as conversation is a constantly shifting thing, and it's
yeah,
pretty much defined by white privilege. If you go back to the Ebonics stuff in the mid '90s, which is really funny, like the last Clinton administration sort of hampered us with all these issues, like the term political correctness, which is like so easily attacked because it is kind of ridiculous on its face as a phrase. That time period also brought us the term Ebonics, which is like I haven't heard that used in a long time, but it's so interesting because it's so like exoticizing. Like it's making the way that black people talk sound like some kind of like fantasy jungle land from Disneyland or some shit, right? Like Ebonics. But
yeah,
point being that at one point it was like they started somebody started trying to teach Ebonics in school, and there was this big like outcry where like well, you can't do that because it's a bastardized form of English, and people aren't going to be able to communicate properly. And you're just like obviously there's racism in back of that. Not for everybody, and not like right up front, but there is some like well, I don't want my kids learning that jive talk, you know. But there's a way that like how do I put this? If you tell someone, "Hey, we're going to this fancy party, and we need to be on our best behavior, and we need to act right," like you're not gonna walk in and be like, "Yo, what's up?" And that's kind of because communication that is specific to a certain race in this country is seen as lower than another, right?
yeah.
Um,
Well, for
and
example, the sorry to interrupt you, but
oh, it's
the
okay.
if you're using an example of a party, when people say we have to be on our best behavior, the other thing is I think people kind of use that as a way to not call out things that might be at a party. For
Yeah,
instance, and you can totally stop me if I'm off whatever with this, but if you went to a party and people were making jokes about Asians and things like that, everyone, handed you a calculator or something
yeah,
and
yeah,
said, go in the corner and do something. And it was like, everyone's laughing, ha 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 ha.
yeah.
When people say got to be on your best behavior, what they mean is laugh along with them. Don't
Right.
call that out. And that
Go along with oppression. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, which to me that's not the right way to handle things. You should
Right.
fully feel free to, regardless of the party's social status or whatever,
Hmm.
you should feel free to call that out. And I think it's a problem because we live in a world where you essentially can't at this point.
Right.
You,
Yeah, and I think where that intersects with what I was saying is that the definition of politeness really matters, right? So if you're talking about people who you've seen and you wish that they had handled it a different way, um, I know that you're not going out and like telling people, you're not like tweeting at
oh
people
no.
like, "Hey, change your language here," or like, "This is why
Yeah.
you people aren't listened
Oh
to."
God. Yeah. Do not.
Uh,
Please kill me.
yeah, I have someone on Twitter that I follow, and they follow me, and I caught them in that kind of conversation last night, and I'm still trying to figure out how to handle it. Um,
Yeah.
because that's some bullshit. But anyway, point being that like unless you're prepared to tell me, like, even though you're not communicating this to people, even though this is kind of your like just self-held belief, and uh you're not letting it manifest in a way that's oppressive directly to other people, which is good, obviously. But unless you're kind of prepared to tell me what definition of inclusive politeness you're talking about, I'm not going to be down with that theory. You know what I mean?
I understand
Um,
that.
yeah, and so let's fight, basically. So I'm
All right.
always coming back to that.
So this is what it all leads up to.
Clearly, I know karate. Look at
Oh,
this guy.
obviously.
Look
That's
at this
why
guy right here.
the first thing I thought was,
My,
oh boy, I'm in for it.
like I used to do that. I used to just like stand up to people and just like pray to myself, like, okay, this guy's gotta assume I know kung fu, please. God,
Please help me.
the only way I'm gonna make it out of this. Um, Also, if people, I like this one. When people ask me if I know karate, I say I know of karate. uh,
Nice.
it's just a funny. I don't know.
That's a
I feel
good
like
way to
it's
put
making
it.
fun of them. Yeah,
I mean, like,
because they're racist.
it's just such a weird assumption. Like,
Well, it's only it makes a lot of sense to me, I guess, because like you don't know anything about anybody except for what you see in pop
TV,
culture.
movies,
Yeah,
yeah.
and like that's all we're really there for right now. Yeah, and I like, not that I want to go off on things that like are not really that bad, but like if people start assuming that I'm like the characters in Fresh Off the Boat, I guess that's a little bit better. But like I'm totally not like any of those people. The only thing we have in common is race. And the
When I
idea
say
that
it's
that
a,
could speak to like the entire Asian American experience is really odd.
I mean, when I say it's a weird assumption, what I mean is like, I don't know, like I try to you can have those assumptions about people. Like we obviously based on our own experiences are going to expect things out of certain people. Like there's this sounds weird, but there's people with like certain kinds of faces that I see and I'm like this person's going to be an asshole. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just like because by
yeah.
experience people who look like this person are assholes.
Right, right.
But to kind of carry that into a conversation with that person
Right.
to me is kind of weird. Like this it's still a different person,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what you expect and whatever you can go in with all your prejudices because everyone's gonna have them. I think that's the another issue with
yeah,
people is that you're not going to stop yourself from being prejudiced and for having preconceptions about somebody
yeah.
or a group of people or whatever, but you shouldn't let that influence your kind of interaction with those people.
Right.
That's an issue I have.
Yeah. I think you touch on something really important, which is that we do have to acknowledge our prejudices, but I also think a lot of us have to just be able to come out and say, "Yeah, I'm racist," and like understand what that means. Because I, I, I know that I'm racist. Like, and that means something different for different people. Like for white people, it's the N word, right? Like if you call if you call a white person a racist, that's the closest thing
Yeah,
to calling them. Like they just get really really upset, and like I don't know why, because again, it's like you kind of implied earlier. It's like saying you're wearing a red shirt today. Well, I am, like, you know what I mean? It's like, but I could take it off, like in the same way that I can try to mitigate my own racism. Um,
yeah.
like you only get mad at that kind of stuff if you feel like you can't change it. So what is it that's like making people feel like they can't change it? But
That's two. There's two things with that I kind of want to, from my perspective and how I was raised and things. The first thing, like I said, is kind of I think there's a huge difference between somebody being a racist and somebody doing things that are racist. For
mm,
instance, and I think that's a problem that people have is, you know, you can do all these things. If you're a racist, to me, pretty much you're not going to change. You have those beliefs. Nobody's going to change those beliefs.
mm,
Whatever. If you
right,
do things that are racist or contribute to racism, you can change those actions. You can
mm,
look at this and say, "Hey, what I'm doing is not okay. I'm going to stop doing these things."
hmm
And I think that's one huge thing that people kind of are unable to separate. is they
Right.
feel like when somebody's, for instance, because I see this and I had to actually block somebody once because it was a post about you know what was it about, basically using the N word,
Mm.
and it was about how like, or no, it was about the BET, how like BET has the Black Awards, and then they were like, oh, but if we had a white channel, then that's racist. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it is racist.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily I mean, at least again, this is my opinion, but it doesn't necessarily make you a racist to hold that belief that we should have that kind of channel. I think it's more a sense of ignorance. You don't
Mm.
realize why that itself is contributing to racism versus why BET having a Black Award is not.
Right. I think I agree with you kind of in an intellectual sense, but in a practical sense, there's very little difference between the results of someone who does racist things and is racist, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you're just someone who does racist stuff and you have the capability to change, but you're not changing, you're gonna end up hiring the same amount of white people versus black people or people of other colors as someone who is quote unquote truly racist. And you also can't identify it, kind of the difference between the two, because you can't see into somebody's heart and think like if they're going to be able to change or not. So from a practical standpoint, like a boots on the ground standpoint, for people of color, I'm not sure that it makes that it makes their life any easier to draw that distinction. And kind of referencing back what I said earlier, I I'm trying to condition myself so I have less and less of a resistance towards calling myself a racist because like I'm doing shit. Well, you saw I tweeted about 100 plus episodes and zero black women have appeared on the show.
yeah,
And actually, so my next episode is finally I'll be I have talked to a black woman about that and kind of tried to explore why it is that I, someone who sees myself as an activist for diversity and anti-oppression and everything, would have subconsciously done that. And I'm not sure if I call myself a racist in the episode, but it's like for 3 years I was doing something that was oppressive, and the reason I did it was because I was following what I was interested in. And so, like, I need to recognize about myself that apparently I was not interested in hearing the perspective of any black women on any subject whatsoever. Like, I talked to black men, an Asian or a black man, an Asian woman, and an Asian man about black issues, and it seems silly in retrospect that I would feel comfortable talking to those people about it, but not like actually bring in someone who's had that experience. But if you analogize it a different way, it'd be like talking about people who have people who have disabilities, but having five able-bodied people saying what they think about it, and it just doesn't make any sense. Like in my opinion, the actions that I've taken because you can't be subject or because you can't be objective with yourself. Sometimes you have to look at the actions that you've taken and be like, well, I didn't know this about myself, but apparently I'm a fucking racist. Like apparently I feel this way about this thing. Now then you make the opportunity, you take the opportunity to change and everything. But I think if you say, well, all right, so I interviewed a black woman, I'm going to post that episode a week from today, and we talked about some stuff that's really good. I have now eliminated my racism. Like that seems to me like you're closing the gate, right,
yeah.
to understanding things about yourself in the future. So I mean, I'm not straightforward. I'm not just like trying to Mad Max through like what you're saying.
No, no, no. I
I
get
guess
it.
I'm just yeah. I think there's also like this way that you can. It's just like we were talking about politeness. Like you kind of if you look at it from the other side and say, well, let's maybe make it more okay to accept our racism than make it then like maybe we should do that instead of like trying to provide more nuance to what it means to be racist, right?
Well, my other point is like, it's not people of color's responsibility to make the distinction between somebody whose actions are racist and somebody who's racist because, like you said, practically there's no difference. The effect
Mm-hmm.
in the end is the same. It's
Mm-hmm.
not their responsibility. When I say these things, I'm only saying them from my point of view, as
Yeah,
far as rationalizing, not condoning. but kind of understanding why these things happen from this side,
Yeah, yeah.
to say like, and that's what I'm saying. That's why I think people take it as a personal attack, because they themselves can't separate it, and
Right.
that's our, I say they, that's our responsibility to
Yeah.
make that separation. When somebody calls me out and says, "Hey, what you're doing is racist or sexist or whatever," and that's why there's such, I think, a backlash when people
Yeah.
hear that stuff, is because they can't separate it. They can't. They all they take it as is a per. And again, the other thing is, like I said, it's more what I'm taught. What we're taught in general is it's worse to call somebody out on the racism than the racism, and that's
Mm.
something. It's, I mean, at least in my area, I don't know. Again, outside really, but I've encountered people who have a similar mentality.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it feels like, is that where it's instilled in our brains that, oh, don't talk about that person, it's not polite to tell them that they're being a racist,
Yeah.
just let it go.
Right.
And that's kind of where I think a lot of the, like I said, it's nobody's responsibility but our own
Yeah. Well,
to
yeah. I
do
mean,
it.
that's the thing too. Like, we gotta change it. But we can't be like, well, that's we'll let future generations do that. Like, at least we can kind of start a foothold on it. I actually have a question for you. Like, what
Yeah.
if you tweeted something and I responded to you and I said, "Stop being a racist"? Like, how would you feel about that?
Honestly, my concern would be more with hurting you as a friend than it
Mm,
would be with being called a racist. If
mm.
that kind of makes sense.
No, it does. Like, maybe if it was something that didn't apply to me, maybe if it was something having to do with like black women, which
Well,
I've
anything in
already
general, like
established that I don't care about them apparently.
I would try to figure out a way to change that. I
Mm,
mean, I don't. I've told people, call me out on my bullshit. Like, if you see me doing stuff, because again, a lot of it is doing that, is calling it out, because people don't realize what they're doing a lot
mhm.
of times.
Yeah,
And like you said, you didn't realize what you were doing until you kind of sat down and actually looked at it and said, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's the other thing, is I think it is important, but that's kind of where I get into the, there's a way to handle it. If somebody's doing something that's not okay, it's definitely rooted in racism, and
Mm,
you're gonna berate them and call them out in a way that is kind of a personal attack. I don't
mhm.
think that's the right way to handle, especially if it's somebody you personally know,
Yeah,
because that, again, that person probably doesn't know what they're doing.
yeah.
And it is good to, you can make the assumption, and this is another thing that I've personally encountered, you can make the assumption that somebody should know better, and we should. I mean, again, this is a separation between what should be and what is. We
Hmm.
should know what we're doing, we should know better, but we don't. And
Right.
if you're going to call somebody out, it's more beneficial for everybody in this entire world to at least put some education in it, versus just assuming that by calling them out, they're going to instantly realize what they're doing.
Yeah, I can kind of get on board with that. Actually, like talking to someone that I already know, that's the one exception that I make where anger, like responding with anger, might not be the right thing to do. But that's only because there's more context, right? Like, because what we were talking about earlier about how it's impossible to determine whether someone is a racist or is being racist.
Yes.
You can establish that if you have enough context about the person outside of that one tweet or whatever. Um, but I think it's also important to um, I think it's also important to realize what calling out means because, and I've seen this too. Like I hesitate to use the term white supremacy very much in my tweets. Like it comes out sometimes, but man, people have a reaction to that. Like they believe they're being called the KKK, but like
Yeah.
really what it is it's a way to describe the kind of unconscious bias that um, everybody, not just white people, but also people of color, have towards their kind of positive feelings about white people, right? Like that's the hydra of emotion that kind of covers the earth at this point. And so it's a really useful term, but like it's a useful term and it's something that needs to be really reckoned with, in my opinion, because it does not only generate from what white people are currently doing, but it also generates from what people of color aspire to, like the skin whitening in India or in other places and that kind of thing. Like that's all about white supremacy, and so being able to kind of take all that stuff and put it under the same umbrella, like really allows you to have a better conversation about it. But like I said, the reactions are so kind of off the mark that I've been called out just for using that terminology, even though it's accurate. So if the people in power have the ability to take words like politically correct or oppressed or marginalized or whatever and say that like as soon as you invoke those terms you are being impolite or you're calling somebody out, then eventually you end up with no language to even talk about it, right?
Yeah,
Like if the word the is going to be oppressive to people in power, like how are you supposed to communicate at all? Like it gets to a certain level where it's like, I'm sorry, but white supremacy is the best way to describe what I'm talking about.
yeah.
And so it's being able to determine what is calling out and what's not calling out is it's a feature of oppression, right?
Calling out shouldn't necessarily be a dirty word, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, I welcome people telling, but that's the thing. I think there's a difference between just shouting at somebody, "Hey, what you're doing is racist. You're a racist," something like that, and saying what you're doing is contributing to racism because of this, and something like that. There's kind of it's kind of just elaborating more. And again, I'm not saying this is why I hate talking about this from my point because I
Yeah.
feel like I am trying. It feels like what I'm saying is kind of talking over people and
Yeah.
is kind of trying to tell people you can't do this because you're upsetting people in power. And there are people that do react like that. You've seen it, but
Yeah.
like that's not what I'm trying to say. That's it's not. I'm not saying don't do this. I'm not saying you have no right. You're not entitled to do this.
Yeah.
You need to conform in every way, shape, or form. I
But you are
just
kind of saying it might be more effective though.
yeah, that's and again, this is all from my personal experience. Is it is a little bit more conductive to me to have somebody tell me why what I'm doing is wrong versus just saying what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
It's kind of and I know a lot of people are probably going to get upset about this, but it's kind of like when you're dealing with a child.
Hmm.
And what's worse, to tell the child what you did is wrong or to sit the child down and say, here's why what you did is wrong. You kicked your brother in the shins.
Right.
That's bad. You're in timeout.
Well, I mean, the reason that the reason you want to do that is because children don't have a mechanism on their own to be able to kind of figure out those things, and so I I feel like it's and we're kind of going around in circles, so I'll kind of tone it down, but like I would like it to be a normal reaction to hear that kind of stuff, and instead of like firing off a reply tweet about who's the real racist here, uh, it would be nice if the automatic reaction instead of doing that would be to go to Google and be like, okay, let me try to figure out like why what I said um, supports the patriarchy or whatever, right?
Well, I see. I have an issue with that. That's
Mm.
specifically when I was talking about how I have issues with specific things.
Yeah,
That in particular is probably one of my issues. Is when people say Google it,
yeah.
because when you're dealing with things like this, you can't just Google it. Like you can't just search for instance, feminism,
Why? What did
and
I say that was racist? And then like I hope it's
and
gonna
it
come
just
up.
tells you
No, I get you.
exactly.
Yeah, no, no, I totally get you. I totally get you. But
I'm not
like,
saying it's a valid. It's. I'm not trying to say like it's not a valid response to
no,
humor
no, I
people by
know,
saying that, but
I know, but like that, like it's kind of limiting to say because I totally get what you're saying. But what I think when I say you should Google it, it's really shorthand for saying, okay, look at the other tweets in this person's timeline, look at the other responses. Maybe they've responded to somebody else who said something similar to you that you can find out. Like in Twitter, I have never hit a place where I was like, I can't figure out what's going on here. Like I may have had to go through someone's timeline for an hour, but I've literally never hit a place where I was like, I have no idea what's going on here because on Twitter, especially, chances are if someone is reacting to something in that way, it means that they've answered the question before. Like
Yeah,
that's almost 100%, a probability there. So, um,
which I get. And again, I'm saying that it's a completely valid like I'm not trying to
no, I know.
invalidate that way of handling things, but when I look at stuff like that, and and then the other thing with that Google thing is not just necessarily about specific movements or anything like that, or whatever you want to say, and how you can't capture the nuances of that by just Googling something or even by looking at just one person's timeline. There's no way to really capture all that by doing that. And I'm not saying it's again, this is why I hate doing this, but I'm not trying to say it's their responsibility to educate.
I think where it gets a little mushier, a little bit more difficult to handle is when you're talking about something like feminism or rape culture. Because if you start looking stuff up, especially in a movement that's so kind of new, like nobody heard the term rape culture until 2 years ago or so,
Yeah,
um, that starts depending on who you trust. Like if like this judge in the Gameshi case saying basically that I might be getting confused. I don't want to say it. I don't want to get it wrong, but like there have been judges, not just that one, but also in the past, there have been judges that are like, well, I mean, I find it pretty clear that these women, if this happened, that they may have deserved it. So that's part of my ruling, right?
yeah,
Like now, if you start looking stuff up on Google, it's kind of based on that. What you're going to find is authority figures who are saying things that are morally reprehensible. And so the current truth that we stand on by giving certain people the authority to kind of like be more have more of an effect on what we view as the truth means that the truth can sometimes be a little bit mushy. And I know it's not something a lot of people like to hear, like that
yeah.
people really do want to feel like there is a solid truth. And I was definitely one of those people who's just like, no, there's a completely objective platonic ideal somewhere at play here, and you just got to find it. When I've kind of I feel like I've moved away from that feeling just because um, I mean it does kind of go back to Ferguson, where it's like, what is the truth? Are these people destroying their own community, or are they making a statement? And maybe you can say that it's both, but and it probably is. Like in all reality, it probably is both things. But that doesn't. Um, People want to use like what the truth is to decide what side they're going to be on, not to figure out what the truth actually is, right? And so that almost discredits the search for truth in the first place. None of these thoughts are making sense,
No,
but
I kind of get where
there's
you're
something.
going with that. And I don't know if you saw like after the Gomeshi thing, like my little rant about it, because
Not sure.
well, so like I follow a lot of people who have different points of views because I where I am in my position, I have the ability to be able to do that without getting emotional about things. You know what I mean? Like I can understand
Mhm.
why somebody doesn't want to follow or associate with people who have conflicting views. I totally get that. And I
Yeah,
understand that I'm in a unique position where I can follow both sides. Like I've seen
yeah,
tweets where, for instance, you've tweeted something, and then the following tweet I see is the exact opposite of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I'm not going to immediately, you know what I mean? Like I'm not going to unfollow people for that reason, I guess,
yeah, yeah,
because I think it's good to at least. I don't want to say see both sides or play the devil's advocate, but
yeah, yeah.
it's at least good to know what the other side is, whether or not you agree with it, whether or not you think it's problematic, whether or not you hate it.
Right.
At least knowing what it is. You don't have to accept it, but I find that's good. And again, I understand this isn't universal. This is me. But where I'm kind of going with that is on the Gomeshi thing. What I was seeing was a lot of people were tweeting that that proved that the women lied or that the woman wasn't raped and that she was a liar.
Mhm.
And my point was that's not what it proves at all. It doesn't prove that she lied about it. It doesn't prove that the rape never happened. It doesn't prove it did, but it does not prove that it did not. You can't just
Mhm.
go out and say she's a liar because he was found not guilty. That's not
Right.
how it works, and that's not the
Right.
truth.
Well, these are a lot of these are the same people who are like, "Oh, OJ did it. I don't care what the court says." like
Yeah,
kind
that's
of taking
exactly
both
the
sides
same
on
thing.
it. Yeah.
Exactly, like you know, it's the exact same thing. People immediately jump to he's guilty, based off of everything that happened. I mean,
Right. Well, but it's a lot of times it's the same people that are saying like, well, the justice system determined this, so that means that that actually happened.
yeah,
Oh, but in this other case, the justice
ex-
system got it wrong, and it's like, come
it
on, man.
doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, here's the thing: like, I'm more inclined to believe her, the woman, in that case.
Mhm.
In most cases, I would say, based off of everything, just because, like people have said, it's not like it's accusing somebody of rape isn't just like buying a lottery ticket at the store. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like
Yeah. It's a hard
it's
thing. Yeah.
it essentially ruins your life, and especially if that person's found not guilty, which chances are they're going to be found not guilty, your life is ruined,
Yeah.
and there's no coming back from that. So to just automatically assume that she lied about it or that women are lying about that is just wrong to me. Like,
Yeah.
if you look at it from a logical point of view, like
Hmm.
I saw your tweet about how you really can't be objective and that emotion always plays a part,
Hmm.
which thing you're going for. But I think you kind of can be logical. You can't be
Yeah.
objective, but you can be logical about things.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of it is if you look at something and say, logically speaking, why would this woman go out of her way to accuse somebody when the chances of it backfiring are greater than her getting or her whatever goal you want to say she has in accusing
Yeah.
this guy of rape.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like logically, how does that make sense that somebody would actually do that?
Yeah. I think people have a really hard time with incentives. Um, I think it would be nice if we had more famous behavioral economists because some of them have studied a lot of this stuff, and that usually should be the first question. Like, what exactly is the motivation behind, or what's the motivation and what are the actual consequences? Not just the consequences that you think are
Yeah,
happening, right? Like
exactly.
the Aaron Andrews thing. People were flipped out so much that she got awarded this large amount of money, which she's not going to see all of it, first of all.
Yeah,
But even besides like all those kind of legal points, just on a higher philosophical level, um, why put yourself through that at all for any reason? You
yeah,
know, um, I don't know. That kind of goes back to the skepticism thing, where it's like skepticism is definitely a powerful tool of oppression because that's what people use against women like Aaron Andrews or people of color, right? To say like your motives here are impure, um, and so you can't be an authority on anything. People need to earn the right to kind of be taken at their word, and some people never fully earn that right, you know.
yeah,
And I think that's fair. If like I feel like I have a fairly consistent track record on Twitter as far as like how I feel and everything. If I started spewing hatred about the LGBTQ community or the Black community today, then a lot of people would unfollow me. A lot of people would call me out,
pretty sure. Yeah,
and I think that they'd be right to
to
do
do
so, right?
so.
Like I mean,
Hmm.
because it does kind of come down to what you're talking about earlier, kind of the difference between a racist and someone who does racist things.
Yeah,
Um, Nobody's immune from accidentally doing harm, and nobody's immune from purposely doing harm, regardless of what they've done in the past. Like you earn yourself trust, but you only earn a certain amount of it,
hmm,
because sometimes, especially as an activist, you have to say shit that's not going to make sense to everybody, and you have to be able to say stuff with nuance. And so, um, like having being able to build up that trust in people is super important. But like you said, I think it is healthy to remain skeptical because you kind of never know.
yeah.
Um,
That's what I mean. Like, again, you can support somebody or a movement or anything you want 100% and still be skeptical. They're not. That's I
yeah,
think people believe that if you're going to support something, you have to trust it 100%. And
right.
that's to me such a big problem with things
No,
because,
that's not true. Yeah.
and also I think that's a lot of problems with how, especially like celebrities and things, how people get so hurt by celebrities because they put so much trust in them, they trust them 100%, and then they say one thing, and then
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like,
Yep. Yeah. Celebrity. Yeah. We could do a whole like 6 hour thing on just the whole concept of celebrity.
oh yeah, I
Uh,
mean,
I have things to say.
yeah, me too.
Um, yeah, I agree with you there. Like, I definitely think that there's a difference between being skeptical and communicating skepticism. Um, because skepticism, just because of the way that our language works, skepticism is the same thing, or being skeptical in the way that you're describing, you would use the same word to
Yeah,
describe people who are saying, well, did he really rape you?
yeah,
Uh, did you maybe imply yes? Like, and that those are quote unquote skeptics. So, yeah, it can be difficult when there's so much overlap
yeah.
with the words there.
Yeah, it's a hard thing. I mean, and I think our language is evolving. You know, um,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways,
in
like
a lot of ways.
there's definitely a push against it, right? Like
Oh yeah,
people who want to retain old ideas are definitely threatened by new language.
yeah. I mean, to me, like, because I was actually these are thoughts that were going through my head as I was sleeping, trying to sleep last night.
That's,
Um, when you talk about words and stuff, like
mhm.
our words as they exist now exist for a reason. They do have a definition. And the other thing is, I think people mix up connotation and denotation.
Mhm.
People, like, here's what I was thinking specifically: the word abnormal. When you hear abnormal, what do you think of?
Uh, uh,
Negative or positive?
I'm the wrong person to ask, but I'll say negative. I'll say negative.
Most people would say negative. You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
hear
yeah.
abnormal, and you're going to think of disformed, disfigured,
Mm,
or
sure.
something wrong or bad. And that's not what the word actually means. Same thing with for okay, I'll say example for music and movies. Mediocre. When somebody says this thing is mediocre, that's not exactly a bad thing. That just
Right.
means it's average, it's flatline, it's par for the
Yeah,
course.
sort of a neutral thing. Yeah,
Yeah, and but mediocre has such a negative connotation in this world
yeah.
that it doesn't mean what people want it to mean.
Right.
And I think, but I will defend the use of. My point is, if somebody uses mediocre to say this is bad, it's mediocre. It doesn't explain why. They just say this is mediocre. That's why it's bad.
Yeah.
They're not using that word properly, and I have
Hmm.
a problem with that. So I understand what a lot of my point is. I understand what a lot of people have issues with, like people misusing words and things like that to express ideas that they're not that they don't actually mean.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to say this, but what you're actually saying is this.
Right. Right.
Like I'll say something which I know you're going to disagree with me on. Sorry for
Oh,
assuming, but I'm going to assume that you're going to disagree with this.
it's a Christopher Nolan thing.
It is not Christopher Nolan.
Okay. All right.
Um, when people say you can't be racist against white people,
Uh,
I understand what they mean by that. That there's no system of oppression against white people. But the definition of the word racist, you can be racist against somebody who's white. It is possible. It's that's what I mean. I think there needs to be a new word or
depends.
well,
Depends on your definition of racist. Like,
well that's what I mean. Like I think it has a set and that's why I said I knew you were going to disagree with me, which I
yeah.
welcome. I understand that it's a different perspective, it's a different point of view, but to me, you know, white people don't face racism. We don't face a system of oppression every single day. So somebody calling me, are there derogatory terms for white people besides
Yeah, there are some. You can
racist?
like, a friend of mine breaks this down between the words prejudiced and racist,
Okay.
and uses prejudice to mean kind of interpersonal interactions, and racist to mean systemic issues. And I
Okay.
find that that's a really uh, powerful way of breaking it down, I guess, or
Yeah.
more of an easily understandable thing. So I think you can be prejudiced against white people, but I don't think you can be racist against them. And my point, or my thing with that whole definition is that I I think that this moved in the opposite direction that you think it did. I think that the term racist really did start out more talking about systems, and that as it's been used, not to accuse anybody, but as it's been used, especially by white people, it has become like racist means not politically correct.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's the term really stopped. Was it you and I that were tweeting about this about how first world problems originally started
Yeah.
as white people
White
problems?
people
Yeah,
problems. The difference. Yeah.
yeah. So, and there, that's an example of the kind of movement that I'm talking about, where it kind of started as one thing specifically, and it moved to something. Uh, it moved to something that was more like welcoming to people in power. You know what I mean? Because there's no shame in admitting that you're part of the first world.
Yeah.
Like no one's ever been like, oh shit, I'm part of the first world. But like there's a lot of obviously like I think a lot of this is self-generated, but there is like a lot of shame to feeling like you're white. Um,
Uh, well, okay. So I think
yeah,
white guilt is one of the most bullshit terms that has ever been used by a white person,
why is that?
because to, here we're talking about words again. Like, I recognize things that white people have done in the past, and I have no guilt whatsoever about them. I feel
Mm.
bad. I understand that there are things that never should have
Yeah,
happened.
you don't feel personal responsibility.
Exactly. I don't feel personal. I feel shame. I feel shame that these things happen, that I'm associated with those things. I completely feel shameful about that, but I
Yeah,
don't feel guilty about those things,
yeah,
which is what I think a lot of people, and white guilt is used a lot for by white people to essentially tell other white people stop doing these things. Hey, you can't associate with, Black Lives Matters group because it just means you have white guilt. That's the
yeah,
only
yeah, yeah.
reason you're doing it.
Yeah, it's a derogatory term for people who are white doing anything to support people outside of their own race.
Yeah, it's used
Yeah,
by white people to do
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I really hate that term so much because
yeah.
that's like, obviously there are some people who do feel that way, who truly feel guilty about things, and but that's always the way it's portrayed in like movies and cartoons and books and things. The liberal hippie who's you know feels guilty about what happened in the past and is trying to force their ways upon everybody. It's
Mm.
not something that really happens. White people who are trying out there are doing it to for equality, to make this world a better place, not just to appease
Yeah,
some kind of
some
guilt.
people. I look at it as a shorthand for people who like want to be woke but don't know how yet. Because like the desire is there, but the knowledge isn't there yet.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I have a problem with Habitat for Humanity going to places in Africa and building American style housing and forcing Christianity on people.
Hmm.
I feel like that is a white guilt style. Um, I feel like it. Yeah, I mean, okay. I feel like it's absolving white guilt in the sense of white guilt that you're talking about. Like, because what it's doing is it's on the surface, it's like we're doing something great for these people, but in reality, it's imperialism and colonialism
Yeah.
that somehow is accepted by liberal white America. Not only accepted, but really held up as a good example of how to deal with people. And so I think like yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really ever thought about this, but I think what I'm the way that I see the term white guilt is kind of talking not as much about the intentions, but about the ignorance of the side effects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just mean like
No, I understand what you're
I've
saying.
seen it. It's just I see
Stop
that
fighting me. I'm
phrase
gonna fight.
hurled.
Let's
Yeah,
fight.
we'll
Let's
just
just
fight it out.
hurl fists right now. I'm not trying to override what you said. I'm kind of
Like,
trying to add on to it.
no, no, and I agree. It's just from my perspective, I've seen it or just hurled at people as a way to kind of shame them
No, but
for.
those are dickheads. Like
Oh, absolutely, but they
you
run the
can't.
world. That's the problem.
Yeah, yeah. I get what like. I don't know. Yeah. It's so hard if like being an old man yelling at a cloud is a full-time job. And it kind of doesn't leave a lot of space for other things. And like, I'm not gonna judge on what anybody wants to spend their time doing, but
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why like I sometimes I just can't have like the conversation you and I are having right now. Sometimes I just can't do it on Twitter. Sometimes I love it, but sometimes I just can't because
understandable.
um, talking about language and everything. Like, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but it is kind of a privilege to be able to even try to
Oh yeah,
intellectualize things like this.
absolutely. Everything, my entire perspective and my entire point of view is predicated on privilege, and I
Yeah,
understand that. I'm not
right.
going to deny it, and that's the other thing with white guilt is I'm not. I don't feel shameful that I have privilege necessarily. I
Hmm.
feel guilty of the reasons why I have privilege, but not necessarily of it itself. If that
Yeah,
makes sense, like
yeah, yeah, yeah. It does. It does. It does. Like, have you ever thought about what you're gonna do with that privilege?
like that. Well, that's what I mean. Like because you can acknowledge it all you want, but what do you actually do with it? And that's why I try to offer my perspective on things because I feel like I have a unique way of looking at things. And that's the other thing with like talking about like emotion getting in the way and things. You know, you're not like I can't see your point of view when you talk about certain things
Hmm.
because I've never experienced that. I listen. I absolutely 100% am going to listen to you, but I've never personally experienced it. So it's I have a different perspective on what you've said and things that
Right.
you've dealt with, and it's the same way with you. You know, you're not
Yeah.
white. Like you haven't had these same experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
So and that's why I like following people, and that's why I like talking with people who have different experiences because none of us will have the same experience.
Right.
You know, and I think it's a good thing to kind of look at it from a different point of view and kind of realize where somebody else is coming from. And that's the kind of the whole thing I talk about with empathy, you know, and sympathy,
Hmm.
and to combine everything with like fake allyship and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
People
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
sympathy. That's the problem. Is white people will look at different oppressed groups and say, "Well, I feel bad for them.
Right.
I'm sympathizing with them, and I'm going to do this because I feel bad about it." Versus, I understand where they're coming from. I understand why they're upset about things. You know,
Hmm.
I feel bad. I have sympathy, but I also have empathy. I also can understand what they're going through, whether I've experienced it or not, because I'm willing to listen and say, I hear you. I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, and let me know what I can do
Yeah.
with my privilege. Let me know what I can do.
You're doing one thing that is extremely helpful, which is you're giving money to a person of color by supporting me on Patreon.
Yes.
Um, Kind of the intersection between capitalism and all this stuff is it makes us like feel um, makes us feel like money is like just asking for money is like vulgar or something like that.
Yeah.
But like honestly, the best thing you can do, and you do this, like you do all these things, so that's awesome. Is to amplify the voices of oppressed groups by retweeting me,
Mm-hmm.
which you do, uh, supporting financially, which you do by giving me money, and not just me, other people. I'm saying that for comedy purposes, but
Yes.
like I know that you support other people as well. So yeah, just keep doing that.
Yeah.
I need to go eat a sandwich.
Okay. Sounds
I'm
good.
starving.